Good evening and welcome to the April 5th meeting of the Westborough Planning Board. We have a full agenda tonight. I will read that into the record first. We have an interview with Allison Lindsay regarding an appointment to the Design Review Board. We have a vote to approve a peer review for 2529 Research Drive. We have a continuation of the public hearing for 9 Otis Street and possible vote on decision. We have a public hearing for site plan review application at 54 Otis Street, public hearing for site plan review application at 151-155 Oak Street. We have a discussion of 231 Turnpike Road, Regal Cinema. You guys can't hear me, sorry. You should all have a written copy of this anyway. We have to appoint representatives to the Capital Expenditure Committee and the Zoning Review Committee, and we have a discussion of the board signatory for meeting minutes. We also have an A&R at 22 Gleason, and that should take us up till midnight. So let's get started. Allison, are you here? Allison, could you come forward and introduce yourself? Allison has sent a letter of interest in being appointed to the Design Review Board. As is customary, we'd like to have her in to meet the board, give the board a chance to ask any questions, and have her talk a little bit about her interest. You can sit, though.
Okay,
yeah,
thank
you don't
you.
have to stay.
I feel like I'm at the Wizard of Oz.
So, Allison, just feel free to talk about what led you to be interested.
Sure. So my name is Allison Lindsay. I'm a resident here in Westborough, grew up in Westborough, as did my entire family. And I'm also a small business owner. And I have, with my business partner, Meredith Taylor, have owned Lindsay Taylor Spa-Tique, presently at 45 East Main Street, previously at 71 East Main Street. And going through the process of opening both locations, going in front of the Design Review Board, and kind of it piqued my interest 5.5 years ago when we first opened, and talking about our signage and what we needed to do to make the outside of our business presentable. Robbins, and he said, "You'd be a great candidate for this board," but I just wasn't ready for it. But now our business is going very well, and I feel like I can devote a little time to things outside of the business. And I think going to town meeting a few weeks ago, and I kept hearing, "You got to get involved, you got to get involved," and the message got through to me. So it was time for me to step up and give back in a way to my community that I love so much.
Great. Any questions from the board?
Sure. So, Allison, you described the experience that you had as an applicant. I'd be curious how, did that experience and any key learnings kind of inform your interest in the DRB?
Yeah, the main thing that was discussed when we went through the process was all about our sign. And it was a great learning experience for me to see how specific at the time, like our first application was rejected for our sign, and what they asked us to do to go back and change. And it makes sense to me as to, why we were asked to do that. But it also opened up my eyes as to my understanding of what the Design Review Board does, and that its main goal, if I understand it correctly, is to keep our downtown beautiful, and that our businesses are really, responsible for that. So, that was my kind of takeaway from it, is that I learned how specific, but I also learned what the big picture looked like.
All right, great, thank you.
I just had one question. I'm the planning board representative to the DBR, so I'm delighted that you're interested in it. I suggest maybe you come to a historical commission meeting They're held the third Wednesday of the month, and if you want to let me know, they're in the historical office, which is just across over there on the same building here. Because that'll give you a little more idea about sort of the requirements that we're looking for from the Historical Commission, because sometimes the Historical Commission and the DBR we often work together to try to promote the downtown area.
Right,
So
and
you
I know
just,
that we kind of ran into that a little bit with our new business, that the
Exactly.
signs had to be a certain
Right,
color,
right.
even though they weren't our colors.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would love that.
okay, so that might be, kind of an informed meeting for you to come to,
Okay.
because it'll really give you an idea of the attitude towards the Historical Board, Commission has.
Okay.
And then combining with the Design Review Board, we work together on things.
Okay.
So
Yep.
I'm delighted, and I will let you know the next meeting.
Sure.
And if you want to come any third Wednesday that you're available.
Okay,
It's at
yeah.
7 o'clock.
Okay, 7
Okay.
o'clock I can do. It's not my
Great.
bedtime yet.
All right. Sounds good, but I'm delighted that you're interested. It's nice to see people step up in the community who want to participate.
Thank you.
I think it's great that you want to step up as well, but I just want to understand the motivation. Is it to make it more lenient? Because it sounds like you've run into a few problems going through the process, or is it just, because I do want to, what Hazel is stressing, I think is very important to keep our image one way, so I just.
Right. No, I mean, I had no problem. I understood the reason. I understand the reasoning behind it.
Okay.
And I wouldn't say there was ever any problems along the way. We questioned our landlord. Can we do something outside of those colors, because they're not our logo colors, and that is our branding. But we understood as to why, and just, driving through the town, I get it. I really get it.
Anything, John? Okay. Well, Allison, it sounds like we got you signed up for DRB and Historical Commission now, so it's pretty much,
I'm not
Pretty
going to
much
leave the
how these
room
things
because you
work
might
in
vote
town.
in for something else.
yeah, we'll see what else we can get you drafted for. But I'll make a motion to appoint Allison Lindsay to the Design Review Board.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's 5-0. Thank you so much for coming in.
Okay.
We really appreciate it.
Okay, and what's next steps from here?
You'll be notified when we have a meeting, but prior to that, you might come in and just send me an email.
Okay,
Come in
will
and we'll
do.
talk about the general duties.
And you will have to go to the town clerk's office and take an oath of office,
Okay,
We'll prepare that form for
and
you.
they'll
Okay.
prepare that for you.
Yeah, oh, great.
thank you.
All right, we have a peer review for 2529 Research Drive. We should all have a copy of that. It's from MDM, Transportation Consultants.
You also have one from Ty and Bond Engineering Consultants.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's right, we have the Ty and Bond, the engineering one as well. So we have two peer reviews that we have to discuss and approve. Jim, do you want to just give us an outline of those? And then we
Sure.
can
As you
have
know,
questions?
when we have a large project like 25 and 29 are concerned, the town engineer makes a decision whether or not they'll do their review internal, or depending on how complicated it is, they'll send it out for peer review. Our town engineer chose to do that, and so you received a scope of services proposal from both Ty and Bond to do the site plan engineering review, and from MDM Consultants to do the traffic peer review. And we've been using Ty and Bond now for a couple of years. We're pleased with their work. The applicant has a copy of their proposal. The same with MDM. As you know, MDM has done a lot of work with us recently. They're particularly been involved with the recent Otis Street corridor study. They know Westborough well, and I think this will be a good project for them to review. The applicant also has a copy of that peer review.
So, any questions?
We assume we have the money.
I'm sorry, go
They
ahead.
have the money, not
They have
us.
the money.
Yes.
Someone has the money.
We had a draft motion on this. Does anybody want to make that motion?
Yeah, I move that the planning board approve the scope of services and contract for the engineering peer review for 25-29 Research Drive as outlined in the proposal referenced as engineering peer review services site plan review application.
Oh, that's supposed to be 25, 29 research.
Thank you. I seem to, yes. 25-29 Research Drive from Teagan Bond dated March 15, 2022.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion of that motion? All those in favor? That's 5-0. You have second motion on this?
I can do it.
Go ahead, Pete.
I move that the planning board approve the scope of services and contract for the traffic peer review for 2529 Research Drive as outlined in the proposal reference as Transportation Review Services 2529 Research Drive Development from MDM Transportation Consultants, Inc., dated April 5th, 2022.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion of that motion? All those in favor? That's 5-0 again. All right, next item on the agenda is a continuation of the public hearing for 9 Otis Street site plan application and a potential vote to approve a decision. Jim, I'm going to turn to you to just summarize where we're at on this.
Yes, so as you know, I see the applicant sitting here. Thank you for coming this evening. We've had the public hearing continued a couple times due to peer review and the town engineer. All of the issues have been worked out. We received a memo from the town engineer stating that she was okay with the review after the responses by the applicant's engineer, and any additional comments that may come up during building permit will be worked out prior to the issuance of the building permit. That's satisfactory to us. And if you like, we can go through the decision, but the applicant is here. They may have some comments about either the decision, and your public hearing is open. If you have anyone here from the public, you may want to recognize them.
Okay, any comments from the board or questions first? Anybody from the public? Go ahead, Hazel.
All right, by reading this, is it specific that there will not be lighting on the parking lot at the end, which is down towards where people live?
Yeah, that does not have any buffer between them and the Mohawk Drive subdivision.
Okay.
So that would be the east and north side of the site and only in the parking area.
Okay, because that doesn't, I'm just looking at lighting under the conditions of approval, and I'm not sure whether
That's in
that
there.
actually covers that, because it just talks about the zoning laws and no glare and new lighting and light pole lighting. Because I thought there was going to be no
Yeah,
lighting
there
whatsoever
is a
at that
condition
end
for
of
that.
the parking lot. Closest to Mohawk Drive. It's D under lighting. It just says they'll be turned off, but I thought there wasn't going to be any lighting down there.
Well, they'll need to have it during hours of operation. So if you're parked in the parking lot in the evening, say in the fall, when it gets dark at 4:30,
Yeah.
someone wants to walk to their vehicle, they'll need light in the parking lot.
All right.
The idea is to have the lighting off when they end their hours of operation.
Okay, because isn't one of the businesses a fitness place? And how late does that go?
That goes till about 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and that's at the front side, the west side
All right, so that,
of, yeah.
right. I mean, that was my concern, is that if you had a business going late, that was the whole point, was that not have the lighting would not affect the, people at that end. So that was why my question came up.
So if that business parks on what would be the west side of the building, that would not be governed by that condition. That condition's for the north and the east side of the building. So with fitness customers, if you have your fitness company park on the west side, that shouldn't affect them,
Okay, so
because
as
their
long
lights
as-
will remain on.
All right, so in other
Yeah,
words,
that-
the lights will go off at the end of the business hours that you use that parking lot for?
Yes, that's correct.
All
We'll
right.
have to have it zoned separately. So
Okay.
that the front of the building, the west side, where we have the pedestrian or the parking, vehicular
Right.
parking for the fitness center.
Okay.
Will be separate, and then all the perimeter lights can go off when our operations shut down.
Fine, that's all I just wanted to make sure of, because I knew there was a business in there that went beyond your regular business hours.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
And the lights in the back are just over the doors, correct?
Say that again?
Now they're in the parking lot.
Okay.
See, they go around the
Oh, yeah,
parking
yeah,
lot.
yeah, yeah, I see.
That-
Isn't that, yeah, okay.
That was why I was, yeah.
So since we're on that section, Jim, there's a typo in your decision number 4D. At the end of the business day to protest, it should be protect, right?
Yes, you're right.
That's true also. That'll be there, but I'm more concerned about. the
Much
lights
different
in the
meaning with protest.
parking lot drive.
Lights don't go off, there could be a protest.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, they were
All
gonna
right,
have them down.
So, any other questions from the board? All right, anyone from the public wishing to speak? Any comments by email or anything? No? All right. Sure.
So I move that the planning board close the public hearing for the site plan review application for 9 Otis Street, Doug Curtis Landscaping.
I second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor of closing the public hearing? Okay. Jim, you circulated a draft decision on this, and presumably everybody on the board has had a chance to review that, but could you take us through that?
Sure, and I want to ask first the applicant if they have any questions before we go through the decision. Were you
I don't
okay with
know.
it? That's good.
I think we're all set.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the only thing I had questions on as we go through, if we could just pause on the hours of construction in case the board wishes to discuss that.
Okay. The first page of the decision dated April 5th, 2022 is simply a description of the plan, the dates of the advertising, and the dates of the public hearing. Second page is a description of the location of the site and the existing conditions. And at the bottom of the page, it begins the proposed new project. So there'll be a new building of about 35,000 square feet on a slab with a 4,500 square foot mezzanine. And the total area will be 39,500 square feet. The building will be divided into 3 separate tenants, and the 3 separate tenant areas are described on page 3. If you have any questions, I don't think there's any confusion on that. Thank you very much for that really good description of your tenant space. The bottom of page 3 is a list of the materials that we received during the application. On page 4, it lists letters that we received in reviewing the application. And then the conditions of approval begin on the bottom of page 4. So that's where I'll begin. Number 1 says, all plans approved through the planning board during the site plan review with comments from all departments shall be verified through record drawings and plans submitted and stamped by a licensed engineer of record and supplemented by construction as-built plans. Said plan shall include all required building, landscaping, utilities, lighting, plot plans, site improvements, and/or any other requirements as specified in the approved decision. The plan shall be approved by the town to verify the as-built plans. Number 2, there shall be no parking of construction vehicles or construction worker vehicles in the right-of-way on Otis Street at any time. All vehicles shall be parked interior to the project site. Number 3, there shall be no loading or offloading of vehicles, equipment, or materials in the right-of-way on Otis Street at any time. All activities involve loading or offloading of vehicles, equipment, or materials shall be conducted interior to the site. Number 4, lighting. A, outdoor lighting owned and maintained by the applicant shall conform to the requirements of the Westborough zoning bylaw and as represented in the plans. The illumination level of these outdoor lights shall not exceed the state maximum specified for parking. There shall be no glare or light pollution caused to adjacent properties. New lighting installation in the parking area shall not exceed a maximum of 20 feet in height, including the installation base as measured from the ground elevation. The lighting fixture shall be full cutoff to prevent light spilling outside of the parking area. D, light pole lighting in the parking area and circulation drives to the north and east side of the site shall be turned off at the end of the business day to protect the abutting residential neighborhood on Mohawk Drive from light glare. E, all wall-pack lighting shall be shielded and down-focused to prevent spill and glare. Number 5, the stormwater management plan operations and management plan shall identify where snow will be stockpiled. Number 6, prior to commencement of construction, the applicant shall have addressed and resolved the comments contained in the peer review letter from Ty and Bond and the town engineer's comment letter as noted in this decision. Prior to commencement of construction activities, the applicant shall hold a pre-construction meeting with the town at the direction of the engineering department. Number 8, fire protection. A, there shall be one fire hydrant located within 100 feet of the department connection. B, all locked gates shall require installation of a rapid access key, a knock box, with preference for an Opticom activated access control. C, all private fire hydrants shall be painted red. Number 9, hours of operation. The hours of construction operation, including all material processing activities for the project, shall be limited to the hours of 7 a.m. and 6 p.m., Monday through Saturday. This includes the starting and idling of vehicles and machinery. Sundays and holidays shall be hours of no operation. Operation of construction equipment by a paid contractor outside the hours specified above may be allowed only by written permission of the building commissioner. Was that where you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to discuss that with the board as far as, this is pretty close to a residential neighborhood, and I'm concerned with the 7 a.m.
I'd like to see it, and I'd like to see it ended earlier on Saturday.
Okay. Well, as a early riser, I would like to see it start later on. So I think Saturday is the main concern for me. Maybe 8 to 5 instead of 7 to 6. Is that
How about 8 to 3?
8 to 3?
And do you look at, do you foreseeing a lot of construction on Saturday?
I wouldn't think so in general. I think that if we got into weather patterns that weren't conducive to working during the week, we might use Saturdays to catch up on schedule. But generally speaking, I would think that if we were working Saturdays, they'd be shorter days.
So you get by with a half day on a Saturday?
I would say so. I would say 8 to 2 or 8 to 3 would be helpful.
Yeah.
But I don't think we need anything beyond that for Saturday work.
Okay. As always, we'd like to balance the desire to get the construction done quickly with protecting the residential neighbors and their quality of life, noise, so on. So,
The applicant can seek an exception if they had some delivery or something from the building superintendent,
Yeah, I
if we
think-
restricted the hours.
I think if we put something in there that unless permission from the,
I have that in there.
It's in there.
Second paragraph.
Yeah.
then they could ask for an exception to that.
Yeah, my concern was that obviously you're going to be doing this during the summer, which is coming up. And, people like to be outside during the summer, particularly on a weekend. And so that was the reason I was hoping that we could do less construction on a Saturday.
All right, so we'll have it read 7 to 6 Monday through Friday and 8 to 3 on Saturday.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Jim, when you're ready, just continue.
Okay. Number 10, the applicant shall comply with all applicable federal, state, and local regulations, including but not limited to CMR Chapter 90, Section 16A, governing idling of vehicles at the site. Are you familiar with that? No. It's easy, I can get it to you. It just talks about leaving your vehicle unattended for more than 5 minutes, you're supposed to shut it off. So that you don't have contractors that decide they're going to start their vehicle and go inside and have breakfast for half an hour.
Makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Can I just interrupt a second? Mark, you made a comment about perhaps 7 o'clock was too early in the morning to start.
Well, I was thinking on the weekends. You
Okay.
think during the week as well?
Okay.
I think the weekend, I think 7 is okay during the week, but
Okay, fine. I just heard you talking about it, so I wanted to
Right,
follow up
it's
on
an industry that starts early,
that.
so.
Right, I know.
Is there earth moving with this?
There will be during the site construction, yes.
Okay. I don't see a lot of mention of that in here, maybe.
It's on the grading plan. That's all reviewed during the engineering review for drainage and grading.
And so, number 12, ensure that construction debris or other materials tracked onto Otis, that would include street sweeping if needed?
Yep,
Okay.
yep. Yeah, so let me finish, let me start with number 11 first.
Sorry.
So hauling of materials or equipment such as fill materials, construction or demolition debris, or construction equipment and the like to and from the project site shall only be allowed from Route 9 to Otis Street and the reverse. There shall be no hauling of materials on other local streets. And this is important for you because Fisher Street has become a truck route that we are trying to avoid having any construction traffic on Fisher Street. That should probably be all right for you, though.
Yeah.
Because most are going to use 9 to Otis Street. Number 12, during the days of construction on the site, at the end of each day, the applicant shall ensure that its construction debris or other materials tracked onto Otis Street be cleaned up on that portion of Otis Street adjacent to the site and in other locations along Otis Street as may be necessary. The applicant shall comply, number 13, the applicant shall comply with all the requirements of the Westborough Conservation Commission later dated February 9th, 2022, and the Conservation Commission Order of Conditions number 332-927. Number 14, the applicant shall designate 2 parking spaces as future electric vehicle charging spaces. These spaces, or EV spaces, shall be shown on the project plan. These spaces shall be EV-ready with electric connections provided at the building facade for future connection to future charging stations. No specified date for the charging station installation is required at this time. The location of the 2 future electric vehicle charging stations will be identified on the as-built plans. Number 15, comments from town department. They're all listed there, including our peer reviews. And then both 16 and 17 are boilerplate for modification and non-performance. That's your decision.
Any questions from the board? Any questions from the applicant? All right. Now we have a draft motion on this as well.
I move that the planning board approve the site plan for Doug Curtis Landscaping at 9 Otis Street with the conditions established in the planning board decision dated April 5th, 2022.
I think we have to close the public hearing first.
Oh, good call, Hazel. All right.
I thought you closed it.
We just did.
You closed it.
Close the public hearing. Close it before we went through the decision.
Oh, did we? Okay, sorry. Thanks.
Okay. Could you just add as amended tonight?
As amended tonight.
Okay.
Second.
Kristen, did you get that motion?
I can run it again.
Okay. Yeah. Just add the, because we made some
As
changes
amended.
tonight, so. All right. We have a motion, and I believe Hazel seconded it?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor? That's 5-0 in favor. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
All right. Next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the site plan review application at 54 Otis Street. Whoever's representing the applicant on this, please come forward, and I will read the notice of public hearing into the record. We have a notice of public hearing, Planning Board, Town of Westborough. The Planning Board hereby gives notice that it will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, April 5th, 2022, starting at or after 6:30 PM in the Great Hall, second floor of the Forbes Municipal Building, 45 West Main Street, Westborough, Massachusetts, to consider the site plan review application of Atlantic Westborough Realty LLC, care of Atlantic Management Corporation, to develop the property with a new 100,000 plus or minus square foot building with integrated surface parking, loading facilities, and on-site infrastructure improvements at the property located at 54 Otis Street, Westborough, Mass. Said property is located in the General Industrial IB zoning district as shown on the Assessor's Map 25, parcels 1-0. A copy of the application and plan are available for review in the Westborough Planning Board offices at 45 West Main Street, Westborough, Mass. On the Planning Board webpage at https://www.town.westborough.ma.us/planning, and the Town Clerk's office at 34 West Main Street, Westborough, Mass. during regular business hours, and that's from the Westborough Planning Board. And that was in the Telegram and Gazette on March 10th and March 17th. Bob, if you could just introduce yourselves for the record, and
Ready to go?
Jim, any comments before they begin?
Please take it away.
Then,
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Robert Buckley, Reamer and Bronstein. It's nice to be back before you. It's been a short hiatus, but we've been very busy in the interim. Behind me to my left, I have Tim Coskren from Atlantic, the applicant. To my immediate left, Will Park from Sims Maney, and Bob Michaud is behind me, our traffic engineer, and Brian Lawler from Sims Maney. Cognizant of your agenda tonight, I'll be brief. The notice summarized what we are doing, which is building a companion or a supplemental research and development facility that will be at 54 Otis Street and will tie into the type of research that is being done at 50. We have had this in the planning for quite some time. So when we did 64 and 50, this was in the hopper, so to speak, or the line. So a lot of the improvements that we advocated for with respect to the Otis Street corridor were factored into account for this development. We've gone through a peer review with the engineering consultant, Ty and Bond, and I believe we're comfortable with their comments to date, and I believe we have correspondence from the town engineer indicating that we should be able to respond to those, and that shouldn't hold up the process. So with that, I think I'll have Will take the board and the audience through the site plan and then answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks, Bob. Will Park, civil engineer at SMMA. So first, take you through the team introductions. As Bob mentioned, the owner applicant is Atlantic Westborough Realty, care of Atlantic Management Corporation out of Framingham. SMMA out of Cambridge is the architect and engineer of record for the project. Legal counsel is Reamer Bronstein. Transportation engineering is MDM Consultants, who are here tonight. Other project members who will not be presenting tonight, the wetland scientist is AECOM, geotechnical engineer, Northeast Geotechnical, and surveyors WSP USA. This is the consultant and design team that Atlantic has used on the other projects that have been before this board. First, existing conditions, just to orient everyone. This is the 54 Otis site, an aerial image several years old now. Otis Street is on the right. If you take Otis Street page north, you will intercept Route 9 shortly. We took some artistic liberties to show the constructed 50 Otis Street project on page south. That's the north facade of the building there, their loading program. The 54 Otis Street site currently has a residential building and barn garage on it now. And right where the 54 label is was previously disturbed as a temporary parking lot during the construction of 50 Otis Street. As for the project itself, this is a rendering of the proposed site plan. The building itself, the square foot is, or the footprint is 80,000 square feet with a second level of 20,000 square feet for a total of 100,000 gross square feet. The parking provided is 186 spaces total. Those are spread throughout the larger lot to the east, a small row to the north, and then some facilities parking to the southwest near the loading docks. As you can see, the loading program is very minimal for this project. It is essentially just a truck loading dock and a compactor space. Through the previous approvals that we've been in front of the board, we took those comments into consideration, especially the site access and circulation. The current property has 2 curb cuts off of Otis Street. We propose to consolidate those into 1, and we've situated it across Otis Street from an existing driveway right here. So we have a shared driveway with 50 Otis Street. The intent is that all truck traffic will use that shared driveway between 54 and 50. It's a much more friendly turning movement into the proposed loading dock. Part of our drawing submission was a swept path analysis that showed that the Westborough fire truck apparatus can comfortably maneuver throughout the whole site. So you'll see that there's one-way arrows beyond the north parking spaces. Everything beyond here is intended to be emergency access only. As you can see here, with how the proposed building 54 corresponds to 50, the design team was shooting for a consistency and uniformity of architecture, landscape architecture, building setbacks, lighting, both fixtures and lighting fixture heights to enhance the campus feel that Atlantic Management has implemented along Otis Street. Folks might recall that there's a multimodal path proposed as part of the Otis Street corridor. On this site plan, you can see that there is, and it's shown on the design plans, there is space reserved along Otis Street for that path in the future. The grading and landscaping is pulled back enough that the current design in the corridor study can easily be accommodated in that area. And one of the peer review comments that we received, as Bob mentioned, was to make sure that our stormwater infrastructure accounted for that future impervious cover, which we are going to be revising that to make sure that it does. Several sustainability notes. The building will comply with the Westborough stretch code requirements, including the roof will be 100% PV ready. The Atlantic Management and their tenant will be installing infrastructure day 1 for EV charging stations, with infrastructure available for future expansion, as that is highly likely to be the case. Bob mentioned that there is a peer review. This board approved the peer review on March 1st, I believe, for Ty and Bond to start that review. Atlantic Management and SMA received those comments last week. We're reviewing them now and providing responses, but as Bob mentioned, we're generally in agreement with them and see no issues to get those resolved shortly, and anticipate that we'll be able to speak to that at the next hearing. A quick glimpse of the architectural design. This is the image from Otis Street. As you can see there, the metal panel facade carries the design aspects of the other projects along Otis Street, and there'll be a storefront for both the tenant entrance and other programming elements that they are proposing inside the building. Real quickly on stormwater, it's a pretty, like all the sites along Otis Street, the underlying soils are very favorable for groundwater recharge, sandy gravels and gravelly sands. So the entire building roof and the majority of the parking is routed to a large subsurface detention system. in the front parking lot, the large rectangle you can see. And we purposely consolidated the two flared end sections where all the stormwater discharges to the northwest here. We wanted to avoid introducing point discharges to these steeper slopes around the perimeter that would be susceptible to erosion. There's also a small intermittent stream right here. I should mention this is a BVW pond right here with an intermittent stream as it connects to a much larger marsh wetland system to the east. We wanted to abilide adding considerable flows upstream of that intermittent stream to avoid possible gullying or erosion. But we feel that this very large recharge system will provide more than enough adequate groundwater recharge to that pond. And we strategically placed those flared end sections in a level spreader downslope of the development, where those level spreaders will encourage sheet flow for the water to overflow those level spreaders at a very small velocity and trickle through the woods as they would in their natural condition. That's all I had from a site and building perspective. Next up is Bob Michaud from MDM.
Thank you, Will. Again, Robert Michaud, Managing Principal of MDM Transportation Consultants. I'll keep the transportation brief, but I'll introduce it by acknowledging that we've produced a fully compliant traffic impact and access study for this specific site that really represents, building on the corridor study that was recently completed, right? So we're using the same baseline conditions grown by a couple of years, all based on pre-COVID traffic information. All of the growth assumptions that were assumed along the corridor as they were previously identified in that corridor study. And we've adjusted the specific assumptions for this particular parcel to reflect this particular tenant and use and evaluated that in that context. So we've looked at two different scenarios. We like to be conservative in how we approach projects. So we've not only considered this facility as a potential R&D type facility, which is characteristically how it's likely to function, but we've also looked at it as an office, a traditional office use, which tends to be a higher generating and higher impact type use. And we've actually applied the higher of those standards, the office, to evaluate the impact. So what we're looking at in terms of raw volume impact is about 100 directional peak hour trips going in during peak hours and far less in the opposite direction depending on time of day. The next slide provides some context in how that relates to the assumptions that were documented in the quarter study. And as you might recall, as a board, that quarter study looked at two scenarios: a moderate growth scenario, which assumed known development to occur along the corridor plus background growth, and a high growth scenario, which assumed all of the master plan update assumptions for growth in the area, including Valenti Drive, Gleason Drive, Otis Street, anywhere in and around this area. When we apply the office standard for this project, how it relates to the moderate growth assumptions, which is a reasonable growth assumption for the next 7-year period, we can show that we're between 2 and 10% lower overall volume when compared to the assumptions and the analysis that's already been included in the quarter study. When we look at the higher growth scenario, which is a 2030, longer term growth pattern, we're actually between 6 and 20% lower than the assumptions that we used, and that serve as the basis for the infrastructure, the widenings, and the improvements that are currently being designed for that quarter. So our conclusion in the study, and there are many more details to the extent the board would like to cover them, is that all of the infrastructure that has already been committed in the quarter for 60 to 64 Otis Street, by 50 Otis Street, and that is currently being advanced as a function of the MassWorks grant application process for the longer term improvements, have already accounted for this impact. In fact, more than accounted for this impact. The levels of service, as they're documented in the comprehensive study are no different than what we'd find in the quarter study. Everything works at level of service D or better. The only delays that might occur are during the evening hours when folks are departing this particular site. But the volumes departing between the two driveways that exist, the consolidated driveway and the shared driveway at 50 Otis, will have very marginal volumes. We're talking about between 20 and 40 left turns an hour for that limited evening peak hour period, or about one vehicle every couple of minutes. So the analysis, even though it might show delays on the driveway itself, leaving shows a queue average of between 1 and 2 cars. And it's the only time of the day that you're going to see that kind of a delay for this particular use. So the conclusion is that it falls well within the parameters of the quarter study, and the mitigation that's been committed previously by others will more than account for the needs of this particular project. I'll conclude by saying, and we'll mention this, that the frontage of this property, we were careful to look at to make sure that it was compliant and not inconsistent with what we're currently designing for infrastructure along that stretch, the shared use path in particular. I will note that along the frontage of this property, that the curb line will actually be shifted out into the roadway from its current alignment. And so what Will has presented shows a green swath of land between the existing curb line and the parking area. That green area will simply expand, if you will, and then a portion will be replaced with the shared use path. So we're comfortable that the access design and the frontage and this is designed properly to be compliant with the quarter plan. And I'll conclude with that. Thank you.
It may be worthwhile, Mr. Chairman, if I may, to update the board on the corridor study and the MassWorks grant. I don't know.
Please do, Bob.
Yeah, I mean, we've had quite a bit of work since we last were here, and advancing it. We've filed an expression of interest for the MassWorks with Shrewsbury and Northborough. We have a high-level meeting yesterday at the State House, and I think the general consensus from all those in attendance at the governmental level was that Westborough was on the cutting edge of planning, that this was well received, the corridor study. So I know our consultants have been working hard. We have a deadline of June 3rd to get the application in, and it's been moving. It's been moving right along. There's been a lot of cooperation. I want to recognize the town staff who's worked with us on it, but Jim would like to add, but I do think the general reaction yesterday was that from a planning perspective, including the people from Mass Highway, which is often difficult to get them to be comfortable, that they saw the merits in everything that's being done here. So when done, the corridor will be a true example of suburban rail transit development, so, which is a real unique position to be in because it's very hard to do.
Jim, did you have comments?
Yeah, so I just want to echo what Bob just said. Yesterday, we had a meeting with the Lieutenant Governor at the State House, myself and the town manager, and Fred Leonardo, our economic development chair, and I should say director. We were accompanied by Atlantic Management, their engineering staff, and their, as well as the District 3 Mass DOT director and the director of DOT in Boston. So this was a high-level meeting. We had an opportunity to explain the intent of the quarter study, how it met the purpose and the mission of MassWorks. We talked about the road safety audit that we held a year ago, January, that was participated by the Regional Planning Agency, all of the stakeholders who are the abutters along Otis Street, engineering staff from both the town as well as the applicant, third-party engineering reviewer, and town staff, of course. And we talked about that, and Mass Highway was able to explain the outcome of that road safety audit, how it related to the quarter study. We then talked about the potential for a new signalized intersection with a realigned Target driveway and a realigned Speedway Plaza driveway. And then we talked about the new proposed signalized intersection with 64 Otis Street, rather, and with the Speedway Plaza driveway. Target would have its own intersection with the auto dealership driveway. I misspoke there for a second. That, and then we talked about the multipurpose trail all the way down to the train station. That was well received by the Lieutenant Governor and her staff, and I actually thought that it was impressive what we were doing. It's going to be a large application, but they see that it's more than just an infrastructure project. It's an economic development project. It's a multimodal project. It's a sustainability project, and it serves the regional commuter rail station. So I think that we have a good application.
Jim, I know that that's a long-term solution, but we had discussed some short-term rephasing of the signaling and restriping to allow 2 left turn lanes. I know I sat through that light for 3 signals last week, so I...
You know, I don't want to get too far out on the thin ice, but that was discussed, and those came out of the safety audit. And I know that Mass Highway was very receptive to those yesterday, and I know that as we progress, Bob could...
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for bringing that up. Atlantic is actually committed to advancing that near-term improvement. And so along with the 25% design long-term plan that's being developed, they're actually separately, but on a parallel track, pursuing split phasing of the intersection. That application will be filed within about a month's time. And we've already had a consultation session with District 3 office and Boston to talk about the parameters of what that would entail. So it has been identified as a priority, if you will, in the road safety audit. It is a distinct commitment of 64 Otis Street. MDM is retained to advance an access permit application that will be filed within about a month's time to make that happen.
And Mr. Chairman, as I indicated earlier, that's why the strategic decision was made by the development team to front load the mitigation up front, because it laid it all out, and the state now knows how the dots will be connected. So if I told you the number we're at today, you'd be shocked. But when I heard it, I was shocked. But
Tim, you had a question?
Yeah, I just had a question for Bob about the status of pedestrian access across the intersection, and just to remind me what the feature of the solution is, and if that came up at all. We have, obviously the Arrive complex and the ability to tie them in with the rest of the community.
That's right.
Safety issues and what have you.
It's a primary objective of the design, actually. So in our recent meeting with District and Boston offices, we had literally a dozen people on the call. We reviewed those specific parameters. And I'm pleased to say that if you look at Lyman Street as the most recent example of a pedestrian crossing of Route 9, we're going to essentially adapt the same type of a design for this Route 9 Otis intersection. And we're going to one-up it. We're actually going to include crossings on all 4 quadrants of the intersection. And so we're going to be a fully compliant, complete streets standard design. And that will absolutely connect to the Arrive. That's one of the primary objectives, is to take that residential density and put them in a safe environment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I just follow up on that a little bit, in the sense that, yeah, I'm just thinking about pedestrian walkways, which Tim raised at this point. And one of the things I'm wondering whether some of the employees, there are restaurants in Speedway Plaza, for example, and, places that employees could go to walk down to. Where are we kind of on that? Is there going to be sufficient safety for pedestrians who might want to walk down to, and cross to Speedway Plaza and go in there and have get lunch?
Yeah, isn't there a crosswalk from, well, go ahead, I'll let you answer the question.
Well, the plans that we're advancing right now include crossings at least 2 locations along the Otis Street corridor, one of which will actually be controlled by what's called a rapid rectangular flashing beacon, RFB. So it elevates the visibility of the crossing. What we can't do necessarily right now is build a sidewalk along the RKA Plaza driveway, right? That's not our property.
Right.
But the likelihood is that if someone really wants to walk through that plaza, they'll probably find ample opportunity to do so, just not on a sidewalk. Long term, we had identified conceptually that would make sense to have that kind of a pedestrian connection, but that really very much involves getting entitlements and rights from RK.
Right.
I would think it's in their best interest, but we can't control that. Yep.
Just before you go to it, this may be temporary measures, but, we spent some time about the sidewalk for, not your applicant, I guess for 64, but 66, the brew pub. And is a temporary measure in lieu of the multi-use trail to just extend the sidewalk in front of this property where, I saw the drawings. It looks like you've provided plenty of space to put the right kind of trail there. Is there anything we're doing in a temporary nature when the building opens?
I know that Atlantic has been engaged in discussions with the brew pub folks to coordinate the designs, for sure. And that longer-term design, the shared use path, the 10-foot wide path, is in the 25% design contiguously, all the way from Arrive to Smith Valley Parkway. How that gets implemented is really going to be subject to the MassWorks grant process. We believe strongly that it's, as Jim mentioned, a very strong application. It hits all of the right points and checks all the right boxes. So there's no reason to believe that that the town won't be successful in securing that. To the extent that does happen, there'll be an expedited design process that brings those plans to constructible standards, a bid process under MassWorks, and implementation as early as spring 2024, or even fall 2023 if things go swimmingly well. So the plans are there, but how that happens, we wouldn't necessarily think it would be efficient to have pieces of it built and then stitched together. We'd rather see it all happen contiguously.
And again, that was a decision we made in the beginning, which was to let's go for the whole thing. And I mean, I go to these meetings a lot on these types of projects, and the meeting yesterday was a rarity. I mean, I don't think there was any serious issues that were raised. We were encouraged to continue pursuing it aggressively.
So Jim, that would, even once all that design is done, it would be subject to easement from Target and from the property owner on the corner?
So the brew pub has given us the easement, as you know. From Target, yes, and we've reached out to them. And we've reached out to 76 Otis Street, which is where the Verizon store is and the Moe's Mexican Grill. We've reached out to them. We spoke to them last week about the easement, showed them. Bob was in the meeting, Fred was in the meeting. We showed them the plan outlined in the corridor study. We talked about the fact that they may need to relocate their ground sign. They may not, but it's very close to their ground sign.
Sure.
Questions were asked about that. They wanted to understand what an easement means, what rights they have in the easement, how that affects the zoning standard of their property. We explained and answered all those questions. It seemed to be a very favorable meeting.
See the benefits, obviously.
They couldn't guarantee that they'd grant an easement now, but they would review it.
So,
Great.
Jim, when we're talking to Target, Atlantic is giving us an easement from the bike trail that goes down to Westborough Village, down to the train station, and they've agreed to an easement up to the Target fields. My hope is that we can get from there out to the new light at Target with a bike, a bikeable route. And I don't know how that that way Park could get out there, the Park Apartments, you could do a whole loop around, it would really be a connective piece. So again, it has nothing to do with this application, but I just think as we're talking to Target, we might want to look at.
Yeah, we haven't gotten a contact with them yet, unfortunately. Today, we spoke with their project architect, who is redesigning some of the parking field for internet order delivery. So when you order on the internet, you can pick it up at Target. And we brought up that issue. We have to speak with a different division, their legal division, so we're trying to get a contact.
All right, I'll make a note to talk to you about that one outside of this forum. Okay. What else do we have? Any other questions?
I had a couple of questions.
Okay,
just briefly.
go ahead, Hazel.
The new building, is that going to look exactly like the existing building, same height, et cetera?
It will be very similar, not identical. Similar transition of the colored metal panels, but not identical.
How about height?
Similar height.
Well, similar can mean a lot of different
Yeah, I
things.
don't
mean,
know
is
the
it
answer to that.
Taller than it? Is it shorter than it? I mean, I'm just out of,
It's high bays, so
It's 1.5 stories, right?
38 feet.
Do you know what 50 is? Yeah, 38 feet. Both of the buildings will be 38 feet plus or minus.
okay. I just wanted some idea about height. My other question was the number of employees in this building.
It's estimated about 230, I believe.
Those are my due at the moment.
Gentlemen, anything else?
We do.
Go ahead. Yeah. Oh, wait a sec. It's a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to address the board on this? Okay, go ahead, Tim.
I move that the planning board continue the public hearing for the site plan review application of Atlantic Management for 54 Otis Street to Tuesday, April 26, 2022 at 6:30 PM.
Second.
Okay, any discussion of that motion? All those in favor of continuance? That's 5-0. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
On notice that on the 26th, I'll be having surgery on my neck. Nothing serious, but I may show up looking like a mummy, so be prepared, all right?
That's all right, Bob. I've had that surgery a couple of times.
But just for clarification, we'll work with staff, but we really don't see any issues. We'd like to keep the hearing open until the 26th because we'll be dealing with the Concom. We just want to make sure that the changes there alter the plans here, so we have to make sure we're approving the same plan. But unless, if you have any issues that you want answers to, I think we've been pretty thorough, but if you could get them to Jim, we'd be more than happy to respond.
Are you going to be taking down the residence fairly shortly? The one on Otis Street?
Demo of the, I'm sorry? Yeah, when we have the approval here, yeah.
So, Bob, I wanted to talk to you about that residence because the town recently acquired a site for the Affordable Housing Trust, and,
You gonna move it?
well, I thought you might move it.
Or you have surgery on your neck.
But I don't know if they're even interested in it, so anyway, it's my thinking out of the box, sorry, guys. Let's move this forward. So you're hoping for a draft decision by the 26th?
Yeah, we'll work with Jim if there are any outstanding issues, but I do think, and just closing, I do think we're gonna keep the pressure on over the next, because we do have a tight timeline to June 3rd to get the application in. Town's been great. We've got a lot of work to do. We do have a good consultant on board. She's not here tonight, but, and based upon the reception that we received yesterday at the state, I think it's in everyone's interest to make sure we meet that deadline. Because as Jim, that's what they kept saying, we check all the boxes. I mean, it's an example of good, as I call it, rail transit planning. You've got residential, you've got commercial, you've got improvements. You're taking a Superfund site and activating it for pedestrian access or amenities, so it touches all the, and it's not just the residential that you did across from the rail station. You've got residential up behind 60.
Yep.
And then you have,
Park Westborough.
I still call it Fountainhead. What is it now? It's called,
Park Westborough.
I'm sorry?
Park Westborough.
Right. So you've got all it really ties it all together. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
All right, next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the site plan review application at 151, 155 Oak Street. And this is another public hearing, so I have another legal notice of the town of Westborough for site plan review hearing pursuant to the rules and regulations relative to site plan review under section 1240 of the zoning bylaws of the town of Westborough. The Westborough Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, April 5th, 2022 at 6:30 PM in the Great Hall of the Forbes Municipal Building, 45 West Main Street, Westborough, Mass. The proposed project includes the construction of a new 4,665 plus or minus square foot, two-story intake building, and a 10,355 plus or minus square foot, three-story office building, along with new paved parking areas, landscaping, stormwater management components, and associated utilities, associated parking, supporting utilities and drainage at 151-155 Oak Street, Spectrum Health Systems Facility. Any person wishing to be heard should appear at the time and place recited above. A copy of the application and plan are available for review in the Westborough Planning Board offices at 45 West Main Street, Westborough, Massachusetts, and the Town Clerk's office at 34 West Main Street, Westborough, Massachusetts, during regular business hours, and that's signed the Westborough Planning Board, and that was also in the Telegram and Gazette, I believe, on the March 21st and March 28th. Jim, any introductory comments, or we can move right to there?
While they're working on the technical connection, as you know, this is an expansion, proposed expansion of Spectrum Health that's been a long time, has a long time presence here in town. It's adjacent to the bus parking lot and the Department of Public Works offices on Oak Street. The proposal is for two new buildings on their existing campus. One is a classroom and intake facility, and the other one is a dormitory facility. The plan shows new access, shared access, and parking, as well as utilities and drainage to support the new buildings. That's all I think I need to say at this time till they're ready. They may need a few minutes.
Mark, do you want to start, or are we waiting for the?
Yep. Could you ask Jeff if he has another adapter that we could try for the projector?
She has it.
What we have isn't what can connect to his laptop.
Jeff, are you up in the Westborough TV?
Well, I gave it to him.
Could you come down and help if you're available?
And if he doesn't have it, then we'll go to
Sure. Go ahead.
I didn't hear.
No, he didn't. I don't know if he heard me. Bear with us.
Nope, not
It's all
yours.
right.
Not yours. Technology's great as long as it works.
Westborough TV, he's our tech guru, so hopefully he can figure it out.
Okay.
Got a handful of dongles.
It's this one.
Nice.
A lost and found.
I don't know what this. I just give that back. It's not hard. Got it. Just leave it on the table. Okay, thank you.
That's a good sign.
All right, we got it.
All right, gentlemen, could you introduce yourself for the record, and then feel free to begin?
Sure. Do you want to wait for Mr. Bouchard or?
Oh,
Need to wait
sorry.
for Pete.
Yeah, we'll wait for Pete to get back. There he comes. No worries. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay. For the record, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mark Donahue from Fletcher Tilton on behalf of Spectrum Health Systems to present the site plan for you this evening. With me is Randy Myron and Matt Merver, both of Bowler Engineering, who are the design consultants who have done the work with regard to the expansion of the Spectrum Health facility. Lou Labeo from Applied Form and Space are the architects and can review with you the specifics of the plan. And Frank Height, the Director of Facilities for Spectrum, is also present to answer any particular questions you may have with regard to the facilities. As Mr. Robbins indicated, the site plan relates to 2 new buildings as part of the existing campus on Oak Street. Spectrum has been a part of this community for more than 40 years, providing valuable young adult residential care at that campus. The expansion is to continue that service in an effective fashion. It creates 2 separate buildings, the first of which you'll hear about, is referred to as the intake building. It's the building closest to Oak Street, and it is designed in order to be the primary source on the first level of all intake of all patients, 24 hours, 7 days a week. That facility is available. It's a 4,655 square foot footprint, a 2-story building that I'll have Mr. Myron walk you through in some detail. The other building on the opposite side, basically on the top right side of the plan, is a 3-story administration building. It has a little over a 10,000 square foot footprint with associated parking. It consolidates parking. It gets parking into parking areas. Parking has been a challenge at the campus in order to meet needs in any fashion and provides those services. It consolidates a number of administrative and clinical type of activities so that they're all in one place, and also make sure that Spectrum doesn't need to start spreading off of campus with some degradation for services to be provided. So with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll have Mr. Myron just kind of walk you around the site plan so you can understand it. If you want to then review the specific buildings, we can do it, and be glad to answer any questions you may have. Just at a high level, we do have your comments from town staff and the like, which we've had a chance to review. We received yesterday Ty and Bond's review letter, and candidly, we haven't really had a chance to digest it in any kind of fashion. So I think time's probably best spent for us to review it, prepare a written response, coordinate with staff any open issues, and come back at another meeting to do that. But we can talk at least about one of the comments from the town level and get some direction from you. So with that, Randy, do you want to go through the site plan?
Yep, I will. So I think this is just an existing aerial of the site. As you can see, it's three parcels of land, each with 1 building on them. As part of this project, we are proposing to extinguish or remove those internal property lines and consolidate it into 1 overall parcel. And as Mark had mentioned, this is the proposed project, just a colored version of the rendered site plan. Down in this lower left-hand corner here is the intake center. It's a 2-story building, and there's a parking area with some ADA parking spaces, as well as some pedestrian sidewalks and connections kind of in front of the building. We're also proposing to tie into some of the existing sidewalks and connections around the center. And then as you move your way towards the right, there's this, right in this area here, there's this, and then as you continue your way to the right of the plan, this is the 3-story office building. It has a basement level with 2 upper levels. And as you can see, similar to the intake building, there's a parking area around it with some sidewalk connections that tie into the existing sidewalks and pedestrian access kind of around the campus around the campus today. In total, we are adding 115 parking spaces, which would bring the overall parking for the entire campus after we would consolidate these lots to 172 parking spaces. And just to kind of briefly touch on some of the other site aspects of the project, we are proposing a new stormwater management system. The system itself has been designed to help mitigate the increase in impervious surfaces due to the buildings and parking areas that are being added. We're proposing to decrease runoff rates, certainly meet the Mass DEP stormwater standards as well as the town standards. There will also be some new underground utilities to service each of the buildings, water, sewer, gas, and electric connections. We aren't proposing to go into Oak Street for any of the new utility connections, as all the connections exist internally within the campus today. And of course, we also have new erosion sediment controls proposed around the limits of the work, just to help limit sediment from being transported to any of the abutting properties. And there are new parking lot lights being added to help illuminate the parking lots, as well as some of the pedestrian areas. The lights themselves are fully cut off LED fixtures. They are proposed to be 20 feet high and in compliance with the town's requirements, and they've been designed to minimize spillover onto the adjacent properties. And then, of course, there's fresh new landscaping being proposed kind of around the site. In total, there is 36 new trees, and there's over 300 new shrubs being added. And you can see the new street trees. The new trees being added are those kind of in color. You can see there's a series of street trees being added along Oak Street. And then the only other item I just wanted to mention is we did add there's a new sidewalk proposed along the frontage of Oak Street that would span across the entire site's frontage. And that was added based on some comments from staff. We've had several meetings with staff, as well as with the fire department, with Deputy Chief Fursky, just to make sure that an apparatus can circulate through the site. And that is just generally it in terms of just a brief overview of the site itself. Would you folks like to see or hear about any of the buildings from the architect?
Sure.
Yeah.
Good evening, Louis Labeo, Applied Form Space Architects. We're the architects for the project. Randy's placed on the current screen, this is the intake building, although due to topography, both levels are actually at grade. The lower level is the main intake center, which will consolidate the intake services that are currently spread throughout the site. And that's essentially a 24/7, 365-day-a-year facility where people will come to be evaluated, and then once they go through the process on the lower level, they'll be taken to the appropriate building on Spectrum's campus via a vehicle that will bring them to the correct location. On the second level is a proposed PHP partial hospitalization program, which is essentially a day program that works essentially 9 to 5. I think Frank can specify hours more clearly than I can, but it's essentially a day program. The building facade, essentially brick, which will to some degree match many of the buildings that are in the area and on the site specifically, with some fiber cement siding that will have a clapboard look to them. As you can see on the north-facing side, it's a one-story structure, and on the south-facing side, which faces Oak Street, it's the 2 stories. The office building itself is essentially just administrative office uses. There's for their employees, the employees that are currently in Worcester, they'll be relocating to this site. On the building's basement level, mainly for storage with staff entry, but then 2 office levels. On the lowest level, which is where the main entry will be, there'll be a grab and go for the employees, as well as some of the administrative uses. We've essentially decided to build the interiors from the top down to minimize disturbances once the building is occupied. On the top level are their main administrative offices. Typical office B use, no clinical use on this particular site, on this particular building. And some of the facade elevations we have on the main facade, which faces in the southerly direction towards Oak Street, but although set back relatively far. Main entry with a glass vestibule, brickwork to again coordinate with what's on campus, and some glass facade. And then on this side, you can see sort of where the grade steps down significantly. The existing topography warrants that We have a walkout area to minimize, we've already got a significant amount of retaining walls to minimize how much additional retaining wall we would need. So on the lowest level, this faces the rear parking lot, and there's a staff entry so that they don't have to walk around the outside to get to the main entry. That's on the left-hand side. And then the right-hand side is essentially for their storage uses. And our renderings of the intake building, the main entry that faces towards Oak Street. And the office building, again, the main entry that faces towards the main parking area of the two parking areas associated with that building. And that's essentially the overview, and we'll respond to any questions you may have.
Is that the whole presentation?
It is.
All right,
Glad
for
to
now.
answer any
I mean, I
questions.
think we're going to have to continue this anyway, but I wanted to turn to the board for questions first. Anybody want to start?
So I just wanted to know, are you adding services? Are you adding patients? What's the reasoning besides enhancing the property for doing this change? Is it to increase overall patients?
Bring other staff.
No, I understand that aspect.
So the only added service is the PHP service. The first floor of the intake building takes, right now, we have different levels of care in different buildings in Westborough. One has its own intake center, so them all under one group, streamline the process, and the office is providing services to clients. Property that we own in Westborough.
That makes sense. Thank you.
How many employees are you moving?
I believe around 100 employees.
Then I just had some questions about any sustainability features, EV charging, solar ready, and also what the heat source is.
Both buildings, with the exception of the areas occupied by mechanical spaces, the roof is entirely solar-ready, and each of the buildings will have one EV-ready parking space. The source for the heating system will be natural gas.
Anything?
Provide outpatient services also?
Currently, the campus provides only inpatient services.
That's what I thought, yeah.
The PhD program is going to be outpatient service, so stay for the day, a lunch.
And which building will they be in? Will they be in one of the,
Top floor of the intake building.
of the new Optech building? Okay, that's what I wondered about, okay. And you've got sufficient parking in the back there to be able to have people drop off and,
More than sufficient parking, and we're making up parking lot that's in front of our existing parking.
So that led to one of my questions, and I don't want to interrupt, but you own 154 across the street.
We own 150, 151, 4, and 155A. We're hoping to two buildings. We have five buildings.
Okay. So you're proposing sidewalks on your side, on this side, on the northern side of Oak Street, but nothing on the southern side? I mean, I'm just curious. I see a crosswalk there, but just curious where that goes. I know I've driven through there, seen people crossing the street, groups of people crossing the street. I've seen cars parked on the lawn.
So the cars parked on the lawn is going to be addressed by that new parking lot.
Right.
You can see the existing sidewalks on the south side of Oak Street. So south side where those vehicles are, so we own from there east. Crosswalk that does exist is an enhanced crosswalk that was added. Slash sidewalk that leads across the lawn that directs all traffic from any building.
I'm sorry, where is that? This one? So then where do they,
That's the
how do they get,
crosswalk now.
and you own the building on the other side of Park Street as well? And how do they get to that?
So they will take the sidewalk that runs along Park Street down and then cross over. You can see the sidewalk in the very bottom corner that leads up to the front door at 150.
I don't see any way to get across Park Street or any sidewalks on.
Park is a pretty lightly traveled street.
Yeah, and I don't see any sidewalks on that other parcel that you own.
Only
Now,
in front of 150.
if you go back to your plan, directly across from Park Street, is there going to be another driveway access there that goes up to the?
No, I mean,
I'm sorry, it's just not clear to me if that's.
So that's, I believe, called Park Street Extension. That's an improved road. It was repaved again several years ago. Every day by your buses. Your buses travel up that road
And they go in that back?
go in that back way. It's the easiest way.
Okay, and so you're proposing connecting your parking lot to that?
It's an existing connection yet now, but yes.
I'll have to think about that.
Go back to the existing conditions, because it's really not a new
yeah,
connection.
you can see it exists right here today. We're not proposing to change that.
Okay, all right. So you're establishing a pretty big presence in town, and you have to be aware that you're using quite a few town services, emergency response, water, sewer. I would like to entertain discussions on a pilot, because I think it's time that, I think it's long overdue, to be honest, that as you grow, the town is going to need to respond with more services in this area. Now, typically, those services are compensated by tax generating real estate, which this will not be. So I would like to introduce the concept of a condition on this permit that you negotiate a pilot with the select.
Concept of a pilot has been broached through the town manager, and we need to engage in those discussions. They're really separate and distinct from the land use issues. There are services that Spectrum does provide to the town in the nature of in-kind that need some discussion and an understanding of all parties. So I'm sure we're going to be having those discussions moving forward.
Okay. We'll table that discussion for now. Any other questions? Jim,
I
comments?
have no additional questions. Just as a point of information for the board, the applicant did appear in front of the select board at their last meeting, and the select board made similar comments about the need for sidewalks and enhanced sidewalk provisions crossing Oak Street. They've shown those on the plans. Their major concern was for pedestrian access along Oak Street, and wanted to have an additional streetlight, I believe, too, on Oak Street.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it may be worth at least having some brief discussion with regard to the selectmen's request for some additional lighting. Probably collectively, the development team all left the site and left the meeting with the selectmen and drove down to see what was actually there, because nobody can remember if there were lights. There are no lights. There are utility poles, I think either 4 or 5, I think, in the frontage, if I can remember correctly. So, we're certainly interested and would assume that the right place to start those discussions would be with DPW. of making a capital contribution to get those so that they would be directly over. Trying to do anything else on our site would violate kind of your site plan guidelines of not sending light over off the property. So that seems to make the most sense to try to do that. And we'll certainly work, and if Mr. Robbins wants to be part of it, we'll try to have a meeting and see what's involved in doing that, and try to come back to you with a concrete answer as to their willingness to do it and how we can contribute.
Okay. Thanks for those comments. Any other questions? Anything from the public on this? Okay, we're going to continue this to the next meeting as well.
You have a motion.
Okay.
I move that the planning board continue the public hearing for the site plan review application of Spectrum Health for 151 to 155 Oak Street to Tuesday, April 26, 2022 at 6:30 PM.
Second.
Any discussion of that motion? All those in favor? 5-0.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda, we had a discussion at 231 Turnpike Road, Regal Cinemas. I wish Lisa had stayed, but she
You want me to
left.
get her?
No, she's on her way home, that's right. We can, if anything comes up for her, then we can ask questions later. But Jim, why don't you introduce this to the board and the public, and we'll open it for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
As you know, the town meeting approved the authority for the town to receive the former Regal Cinema site. And I want to make sure I get the correct address. 231 Turnpike Road. I know it is a different address, but that's okay. That's the legal address, 231 Turnpike Road. And as you know, it was the former site of the Regal Cinemas. There were 12 cinemas interior to that building, as well as concessions inside. The building has been in tax title since 2017. The building has been vacant. It's in very bad shape. The town now officially owns the property. It was discussed briefly at town meeting. I know that over the years, various members of this board have talked about it in different contexts. The property now will become the possession of the town, and the Board of Selectmen, Select Board, has asked for the planning board to weigh in on any potential uses they might see for the future. As background for that, I just wanted to tie it into the master plan. So the master plan identified this site as a primary site for redevelopment. And it stated economic development. That was the primary purpose for the site. The intention was to reactivate the income potential from the site to the town. It didn't recommend any housing use on the site, although there is zoning that through mixed use would allow housing on the site, not as primary use, but as a component of a mixed use project. I know over the years, we've talked about this since it first went into tax title. We talked about how it would relate to the overall highway business district in general and to the master plan specifically. And I think that one thing that you need to think about when you talk about potential reuses is make sure it's a sustainable site, not just a sustainable site from an economic perspective that we receive tax revenue, but from a sustainable Westborough perspective, that whatever the selectmen decide to issue for an RFP, that there are components for sustainability, whether it's EV charging stations, photovoltaic readiness, sustainable heating and cooling apparatus. I think all of those things should be on the table for that discussion.
Who wants to open discussion on this?
I can start.
Go ahead, Hazel.
I guess my main question is the building savable? I mean, in other words, that's number one. Is it sort of a given that the building's gonna have to come down? I mean, that's.
Yeah, my understanding is that it's not in good shape. And
Oh, that's what I keep hearing, so I would just like to have an answer as to whether the building
So I can give you a little background on
is still
that.
usable,
Yeah,
as is.
The security of the building has been compromised numerous times over the years. There's been multiple break-ins. You could get a report from fire and police department as to how many times they've had to respond to securing that building. The interior of the building, because it has been without heat, the roof is in very bad condition. It has leaks. The building probably has mold in the interior of the walls. The bathrooms fixtures, the lighting fixtures have been vandalized and destroyed. The floors probably been compromised because, again, you have expansion and contraction when you don't have heat in the building to keep it secure. The skin of the building has been penetrated through vandals and vandalism, so that adds to, again, to the exchange of air and then the growth of mold inside. Furthermore, the design of the building originally was for said 12 what I call thrust design theaters, where the seating is either looking up at the screen or looking down at the screen. So you have a 45-degree pitch to the flooring in there, and it couldn't be used as it currently exists for anything other than a theater without removing the floor. So you can expect that the entire interior would need to be gutted from the floor to the walls to any windows because of the damage over the years.
I mean, it sounds like they're going to, whoever develops that site is going to take the building down. I mean, that's essentially.
It's a total gut, I
Yeah.
would say, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
and that-
or demolition and build new.
Right.
Yeah, especially if sustainability is a big factor.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it has like, I think if somebody wanted to put a movie theater in there, they might consider trying to renovate it because they have the concrete in place for the amphitheater seating, but again, some of the modern movie theaters, you know, with wider seating and, you know, they might want to just tear it down and start fresh.
Yeah. Well, you see, that was, kind of my thought.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, go ahead.
Kind of start at square one and then move for there. And I mean, my inclination is to try to look at something that would be of benefit to the town of Westborough and the community in Westborough. I mean, obviously would be income producing for tax purposes, but also would enhance services in our own community. And one of the things that kind of came to mind when I was thinking about this was a mixed, I'd like to see a mixed use building. I'd like to see housing plus some commercial development in a building down there. But one of the things is that there's no grocery store on the north side of Route 9. And there is a large population there in Areve and some other places that, and people coming on the north, people that live on the Northborough side of town, that perhaps, a large supermarket might be willing to come in at this particular time is one kind of thing to think about with housing above it, so that you've got a mixed use type of thing that, and there's plenty of parking, so you don't have to worry about that part. So I'd kind of like to see something along those lines, which I think would go along with the master plan myself.
Well, I don't like the idea of any residential uses on that lot at all. I think that first of all, I don't think the town wants growth in the schools. I think the town is pretty happy with the schools the size they are. Certainly don't want to have to build another school. So I'm not sure what type of housing.
Well, I was thinking of senior housing. I mean, they're, and I don't know
From a senior
whether-
housing standpoint, though, Hazel, I would like to see senior housing downtown where there's some access to the library, some access to walkability of some kind. I mean, that site is pretty isolated, and really the only thing you can walk to is the courthouse, and hopefully the seniors won't be going there. So I just don't understand the concept of using our limited sewer capacity, which on on residential uses in that location. To me, if we can't have a movie theater there, which we all loved having a movie theater there, but I think given the economic climate, it's probably unlikely that another theater will be there.
No, it's been, yeah.
You know, I think we've seen the impact of a hockey rink in Marlborough. We don't need another hockey rink, but, you know, something like that brings people from out of town to restaurants, to hotels. And I know, again, I've mentioned this to a couple of people. You know, my son played a lot of basketball growing up, and we would travel to these large-scale basketball facilities where people were coming from New York, New Jersey. They were staying in hotels. They were going to the restaurants in and around the facility. I mean, if you look at, I feel so badly for Red Heat because they moved in, right? And then the movie theater closed like 2 weeks later. But not just that. I mean, you've seen the rest, you know, where the Mexican restaurant is now, the restaurant that was there before went away. I mean, it's clearly the loss of the theater has had an impact on a lot of, on some of the economy there. So, you know, to me, something like that, where if we could encourage, you know, the other thing I like about that is if you have somebody come in and build a large-scale basketball facility, they could negotiate an agreement with the local youth leagues, the same way North Star does. North Star gives the high school teams and the local Pee Wee teams discounted rates, right? So the same thing could happen, and this town is short of gym space, a tremendous shortage of gym space. So if we can get somebody else to build it, now I'm not saying that's the only use, but the idea of residential use there just doesn't make a lot of sense to me to put, you know, I would rather see, you know, the same thing like putting a senior center there or, go ahead, Tim. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, no, my concerns right now are the current state of the building. When our resources, our police and our fire department are going down to that building, it seems based on town meeting on a day-to-day basis, that's got to stop. Because if there's actually a real incident and they're at the dump of the movie theater, that's an issue. So we have to resolve getting that building down. I think that's my major concern, getting that building down so we're not wasting the resources and causing maybe safety issues in the area.
I just want to build on that comment and say that, you know, it was the point I was going to make before. Before we talk about potential uses, we've got a safety and health problem. If you look at national studies around entertainment, there is, and it's been vacant for 4 years as a theater, there are not going to be any theater people that are going to invest into abating the mold. That's out. To me, the select board should be exploring immediately, get an RFI on the complete excavation of the site and how that could maximize the value of that property for the town. I think the existing structure on the site is actually a negative probably to marketing. I'm not an expert in that area, but a clear-cut site. It also borders wetlands, you know, so, and I also agree with you with regard to residential use over there. The Milk Street Route 9 intersection at some point, you know, after the discussion we had, that's a disaster. I don't know whether you've seen the trucks turning every there. So putting more people in that particular location to live doesn't make any sense at all to me.
So that's one of the things I wanted to bring up in our discussion. At some point, that intersection needs to be redesigned, and I would much rather see some type of off-ramp that comes down to the light at Oak Street, right? And just do away with the whole cloverleaf design, because that's not working. Every time a Harvey truck comes off, it has to wait for, eventually you get traffic backed up onto Route 9, and it's an absurd arrangement. And to me, one thing we should consider and recommend that the select board do is whatever easements we might need for a future off-ramp across this site at least, we should factor that into the RFP so that we're not going back to somebody in the future and saying, well, we have to take this, right? So that whoever buys that understands, again, I don't think that's going to solve it. There's other properties that might be affected by an off-ramp. But I think we should look towards the future there, right? I mean, that's kind of what and make sure that whatever goes in there, and certainly it'll have to come here for site plan review, and we'll have an opportunity to weigh in on that as well. But I think we should be envisioning, what's going to be the eventual traffic solution in that intersection? Because the way it's working now is not working.
Yeah, but Mark, that's long-term at this point. I mean, I think the main thing at the moment is, how do we get the building down?
Right, but I have comments on that,
Hazel.
Hazel.
Further than that.
I have comments on that, right? So we have two choices. We can either spend the town's money and take it down, or the RFP can include a request.
Demolition. Right.
We don't know what the potential use may be, right? I mean, let the RFP determine whether that building is going to come down or be repurposed.
Do we,
One of the things is the
you don't
cost.
address the safety risk, and the public, until that building comes down, it presents a target for trouble.
Okay, again, if you're recommending that they take
I'm
it down and
recommending,
then put out the
here's what I'm
RFP?
recommending, that we get a professional consultant to identify the marketability of the property with the structure and the scenario you described, like an RFP to take it down and some time determinant, versus the town spending its money to enhance the site, to take it down, and what's the value of that site after it's been taken down, because it very well may make the best economic sense to taxpayers in Westborough for that site to come down, for us to eliminate the public service demands from our first responders in the near term and address the safety issue and any other health risks that are, kind of presented by the continued deterioration of the building. It's not going to maintain static state. So, and I don't know how long commercial properties of that size in that location, that would go, again, an expert would say, you can count on marketing this property for X number of months under one scenario or the other. So I think that for the taxpayers of Westborough, we need some expertise about A, the short-term plan for preparing the site for sale, and two, how to, what that cost scenario is that you described. Would we be spending too much good money to prepare the site for marketing, and we're better off just living with it falling down?
I would say the majority of folks that look at this are going to look to scrape the site in its entirety. So.
Right, but I just feel like let's let whoever buys it deal with that demolition, because you don't know if they're going to uncover some, I mean, it's never, as far as I know, it's never been used for anything that might be a contaminant, but look at when Atlantic bought the site at 64 Otis, they found so much lead there from the skeet range that they had to, clean it out. Let it be somebody else's problem. Let's get it out for sale.
Well, I'm saying-
But that land wasn't developed, and this land was developed at one time, and
That's true.
So you're not going to uncover lead in the soil because it was already developed once. And my whole thing with this,
But we could get the RFP out and have that all settled, and before we ever get funding from town meeting to demolish it.
But I think one of the things we need to think about as a planning board is what we want at that site. I mean, and look at the master plan, what things are needed in this site. I mean, I think that has a lot to do with it. And I mean, do we want another car salesman there? I mean,
No, we absolutely
That's
don't.
what I'm saying, is that, we really need to think about what the use of that site might be. And so that I would think that would be part of your marketing, obviously, because you would then go out to the appropriate places where you might be able to get a buyer on that. So I think you've got to look at that. I think that's also I think that's the most important part, quite frankly, other than the demolition, which we know has to come down, is the use of that piece of property.
I think this site right now is situated in an area that you would see a lot of interest from industrial, flex, and even R&D developers, similar to what Atlantic's doing, but on a much smaller scale, where you're bringing in, several hundred jobs into the area. Maybe you're, restricting the truck access or the trucking that's being done in the streets there, because I think Mark makes a good point that intersection is a difficult intersection there. But in that area where that retail, I think, has struggled over the years, bringing in the jobs, whether it's flex, R&D, high-paying jobs, would be, significant benefit for the area.
So my feeling on that area would be something like an Apex Entertainment Center. That will definitely meet the needs for the community. It's a place for the young to go to. Actually, anyone of all ages. I've had work events out there, and you also, kids have birthday parties. It's based on that lot, I would think that we would want something to that extent, to have something for our kids in the area to go to, stay out of trouble. I remember growing up, my Friday nights were at that movie theater.
So my issue, though, with that, Pete, is why do we want to draw people away from downtown? The whole point of the master plan was to get people downtown, right? Not get people up to Route 9.
But you can't.
But there's no room down there.
You can't put a major building like an Apex. So right now, people drive to Marlborough to do all these birthday parties. And I know you want to put a basketball court in or a sports center. Northborough has, Mike, we live at that complex right there in Northborough, Teamworks. And so you would be competing with someone right there. So I really feel that a place like Apex, it brings a high volume to Marlborough. There's people from all the surrounding towns that go to a facility like that. They actually, it might help the hotels.
So Teamworks is nothing like the concept that I'm talking about. I mean, you have the baseball center, right, up at near Wegmans, right, and you have the rink in Marlborough and on a smaller scale, North Star, right? But I'm talking about 20, 30 courts of basketball where they have huge
But Mark,
tournaments.
there are a lot of kids in town that don't play sports. I mean, I think we have to look at kids.
But I'm not suggesting
people that,
one use. I'm suggesting a use that will draw that kind of regional presence.
Mark, how is it
whether
that
it
you
be
think?
a fine arts facility, something that will bring people to town and not. I mean, I like the idea of R&D there. I think that would be a good use. But the idea of a supermarket there, I don't know that I agree with that.
I just want to make a comment as a Westborough taxpayer, and speaking for Westborough taxpayers. We just came from town meeting where we have a continually eroding commercial tax base. Quite frankly, I would look to prepare that site to get the maximum possible value relative to the demand, meaning no residential and the highest possible tax revenue from that site, period. And then let the site plan and let the other uses take their course. I don't know what we as a board, I understand the request from the select board is what we would like to see there. But the buyer has private property rights subject to our zoning to put up whatever facility. And I would simply be looking to maximize the value of that property at this point.
But I'm just saying that, there are ways that you can, you can market it in such a way for things with the highest return that perhaps we would prefer to have in that spot versus not prefer to have.
I won't speak for John, but his comments are where the commercial demand is right now, and the complexion of what we're doing in town, is leveraging what Atlantic has done on Otis Street and building in, accessory companies that may be supplying them that are going to be looking for proximate space. So I think, it's what do you get per square foot for buildable space in that zone, and what can we do to lower the rest of the impact to town by way of, services.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that we should put something in there that will generate tax revenue. And I'm not sure that, a retail plaza, I don't think we need another retail plaza in this town. I don't think we need another supermarket. I don't think we need another car dealer, right? We need either, something that'll draw people that will, like I said, fill the hotels and restaurants, or something that'll bring more jobs and more.
Well, there is a difference in the, I mean, I'm not a commercial real estate person, but I assume there's a difference in tax value for putting in something like basketball courts versus R&D. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
So, based on that, if we feel that we want to do, for the maximum benefit of the town, then we need to be looking at the highest and best use as far as taxes go.
And I
But
think
we are limited, it's a request for proposals. We can't go out and say, drag somebody in and say, come and buy this, right? We're gonna put it out there to the public. So I agree
but
with
there-
Tim's.
there
The market
are-
will determine. I mean, quite frankly, the market for the space is what's going to determine it.
I mean, there are ways to market things. I mean, you can market things in any numbers of ways, and you can market them to specific audiences. And that's what people do. I mean, that's
Right.
kind of the normal thing.
I think really, again, we're not being asked to identify a specific use, right? I mean, I think we've discussed a bunch of different uses, and some of those would be good, and some of them, we don't necessarily agree with that, but to be honest with you, it's up to the selectmen to decide what RFP wins, right? But I agree with Tim, the selectmen should explore what the best course of action is, whether it's to demolish it now or get it out there and have somebody else demolish it, right?
I mean, I think.
Look at the cost benefits of that, whether or not it's worthwhile and whether we'll get that money back.
Could we
And
make
then-
a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that they hire a consultant to find out the things that Tim suggested? I mean, I think that's a first step that we all see at this particular time. I mean, hopefully they've thought of it also, but I think before we can really, anybody can proceed any further, we need to get the consultant and figure out whether that building has to come down. If it does, what the cost would be, and what the cost would be, on the other hand, if someone wanted to renovate it. But we need those facts and figures before
I
you
think-
can go out and go any further.
Yeah, I think the sale is going to be transparent to the town and to taxpayers, and so we would be well-served. Even a marketing plan is almost what I'm thinking. It's a little more robust than just, that is a core question, about, because my issue is what's going to prepare the site best to maximize its marketability, shorten the time that the town will be able to sell it in, and I don't have any expertise on that. I'm sure the answers aren't black and white. It's going to be shades of gray, but I would think we would want to expedite getting it to market as soon as possible.
Right.
So this is a very large piece of land, strategically located with access to both Route 9 and Route 135 at a signalized intersection. And the property that is just for the cinema has a large footprint with the majority of the parking for Stagecoach Plaza. It also contains the Assabet River. So on the map that I provided you on the second page of the handout, it shows a rather odd shape to the property. And that's because it contains the Assabet River. And the Assabet River is basically the open space for the parcel. It also contains a sewer pump station. So this property is extremely valuable from a lot of perspectives. You have access to the Assabet River, and I know the Open Space Committee has talked about that on multiple occasions. You have the sewer pump station, which is controlled by this piece of property, and you have access to two major roads with a signalized intersection. I really think that the suggestion, I think it was Tim that started with this suggestion, to have a professional look at the value of this property for multiple uses, highest and best use, and highest and best use based on maintaining the building or raising the building and providing a green space, a green lot, green field, that's the word I'm looking for, a green field, brand new development. When this site was originally permitted as Stagecoach Plaza, prior to that, it was the Brown Farm. The Brown Farm, if I got that name right? Yeah, the Brown farm.
Was a farm, yeah.
Yeah, it was a farm. And there was a 21E study done. So any contaminants were identified and removed. So technically, after the demolition and the cleanup from the demolition, this would be a green field. But a licensed site professional would probably be the professional we would hire, would determine that. And I think there's, just my thought is when, again, because I said this is a very valuable property because of its location, you want to have the best answers going into your RFP. If you already had an idea of what you wanted for a very specific use, if it was obvious, we really need this, but it's not obvious. We want the highest and best use.
No, I completely agree with that, but I think if we put that out there and it comes back and says the highest and best use is 500 townhomes, I'm not going to be supportive of that, right?
That's not consistent with the master plan.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that whatever that instruction is, needs to maybe eliminate some uses that we don't want.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you don't have to take their recommendation. There's
Right.
going to be more than one
Well, then
recommendation.
what's the point of the exercise?
To help the selectmen help determine how it should be marketed. You know, taking into account the master plan. I think Patrick
Right, I
has
mean,
a
the thing
comment.
is, you look at those two together. I mean, for example, the highest and best use may not be the appropriate use for the property in the community. So you don't look at the highest and best use. You look at maybe the second. I mean, any consultant's going to give you, a range of uses and what the expectation of your income is based on the use in that particular piece of property. So, if you've got, when we were doing State Hospital, we were doing the same kinds of things in the fact we were trying to find out what the best use was for a piece of property. And that's what we're looking for here. So we also at the same time, we're looking at similar things. I mean, we had to take down all the State Hospital buildings. So it was marketed so that the demolition was part of the RFP, so we could find someone that would do the demolition and then do their building. But, we were also talking about the best use for that particular piece of property. It turned out to be housing. And I think that's worked all right on that. So I think we're looking at the same kind of exercise that we did with the State Hospital in many ways that we're trying to do with this piece of property.
Yeah, but if you remember the State Hospital, when we had the original charrette, the original highest and best use was market rate housing. Patrick, with no senior restriction, right? And of course, that would have been the most valuable use. We would have made a fortune if we had let somebody come in and put 900.
Townhouses.
Yeah, I mean, that's not what we wanted up there, and I think that's something we have to identify what we don't want. Go ahead.
Yeah, Patrick Welch, Select Board, 15 Chauncey Circle. Just a couple of comments from the Select Board, just so you all know kind of some of the things that we've discussed. And I think the most important thing, not only do we want to understand your comments, but we also hopefully will understand what your evaluation criteria that you'd like to see inside the RFP itself. That's what we're really dealing with here, is understanding how do we want to kind of determine the right criteria by which to weigh offers when they come in. And there's a very strict process to that in regards to, most desirable to least desirable, right? So I'll just mention that the board also did talk about, removing the building. And it was likely going to be a significant cost to the town to remove the building prior to sale. And the board felt that it was pretty important that we try to move this property as quickly as possible. But there are some pieces to that discussion in regards to making sure there's a clear title on the property to get the most advantageous lender for the buyer. Because that's something that has to be weighed in, is whether or not there's a clear title on the property. And we have to wait till January 6th of next year, one full year after we took ownership of the property, for that to happen. I'll also just mention that there is an agreement with the bordering property owners in regards to the type of businesses that can actually be put into the building. So for example, the movie theater, when it was originally put in, agreed not to have a restaurant in the movie theater, right? They could sell popcorn and maybe pizza, movie theater food, but they couldn't have, a full restaurant. And my understanding is that those agreements are still in place today. So just some additional pieces of information for you.
So 2 questions. First, where did you, what was the input on establishing the cost for demolition?
I think it was just an approximation in regards
By
to
who?
the size of the building and, just the expectation of the demolition and the removal of the material. There wasn't really any conversation in my, that I remember in regards to any concern over, hazardous waste or hazardous materials on the site, but more along the lines of just the fact that it's a large building, and to remove a large building would cost a significant amount of money. I've taken my own notes, and I'll look for Kristen.
Doesn't the town have a liability if there were young people in it and it collapsed or something like that?
Well, we do have to maintain liability insurance on the property, and that's one of the costs that we're incurring right now for the year.
I think the only way to demolish it now, though, would be to have a special town meeting, right? And, I mean, otherwise, we have to wait till October, and it may be sold by January 6th.
I guess the point is, of course, it's expensive. I'm talking about a higher level of economic analysis than I think I assume any of us can make, or frankly, anybody on the select board, knowing what they do for a living. So I'm suggesting additional expertise as a first step to protect taxpayers, to support the select board as these decisions move forward. So that can stand on its own. With regard to the covenants that may exist with the abutting property owners, this has gone in, this is tax recovery. This is going to need to go back for, as East Main Street, this is going to have to go back for reclassification, whatever use it's made, that it's in accordance with the zoning in that area. This property doesn't exist as a theater anymore. I would imagine that the covenants that exist, I'm questioning why we would still be bound by those, since.
Well, certainly now that the town is a party to the covenant, we have an opportunity to renegotiate that. If we were to decide that we were going to keep the property, let's say that the town wanted to turn it into something useful for the town itself, then I would assume that we would also renegotiate the covenants.
So those covenants survive transfer of title?
Yes.
Oh, yes, they run with the land.
So that's really the issue, right?
My question, though, was the comment you made that you have to wait a year before you can clear title on that. You said from January 6th. So in other words, title cannot really be transferred till after January 6, 2023.
My understanding is if it doesn't wait until after that period, then there's a risk.
There's a cloud on the title.
Exactly, cloud on the title.
And I understand that. So the thing is that the town really cannot send out RFPs, I wouldn't think, until you knew that you had clear title.
Right, and part of what is in the RFP will be, what we're discussing right now is in addition to the sale would be contingent on after January 6th to accommodate for
So
that.
you could put an RFP out with the understanding that the title transfer will not occur until next January.
Well, yeah, but if I were buying something, I would be very leery about buying something where there could be a cloud on the title. I wouldn't want to put any money into anything.
Well,
So,
right, but you're not, they're not asking for anybody to put much money into it. I guess there's probably some money involved in preparing an RFP.
See, that's the whole thing, going back to what Tim said, is the fact that this is a very dangerous building, and if something happened between now and, being able to technically pass title on it after next January, well, then kind of where are we? Okay, the town is continuing to pay liability insurance, but it doesn't, for health and safety reasons, it's not really a protection. So in other words, the property really has to sit there without any new owner coming in and doing anything on the property until after January 6, 2023. And so this goes back to the original question, is what would be the cost of a demolition, and would that increase the value of the sale price if
But we don't
it
know
was
the answers to
demolished?
that. I think Tim's point is well taken.
That's
that
what I'm saying, is we need more information.
One of our recommendations would be that the select board engage in some type of engage some expertise that can tell us would it be cost-effective to demolish the building now? If so, what would the cost of the demolition be? And should we then entertain, I think it would have to be a special town meeting. Because what's the point of waiting until October?
Yeah. You know, I mean, I just think that it really is, we're right on the edge of this at the moment. And the fact, I mean, no, I don't think, we can't let it sit till after January 2023 without anything moving forward on it.
That's what I wanted to ask, Patrick. It sounds like, does the select board have any even notional timetable for when you want to try to get an RFP out?
Well, I mean, we've gone through, I think we're through at least 2 rounds of revisions on the RFP at this point. So the idea is to get that RFP out there as soon as possible. I think the target was for June.
Okay, great.
So, and that was, and there's also nothing that says, you know, this comment was brought up, and I think at our last meeting was, there's nothing that says even if we get proposals back, we have to accept them. Christie made that pretty clear, that if we don't find something that's desirable, you know, we may go through another round of RFP or whatnot.
Yeah, but the thing is, you know, I personally don't like to see, and we went through this with the hospital originally, is I don't like to see proposals go out and then the town say, well, you know, we really don't like these. I mean, I just feel that the town, it puts the town in a difficult position. I think when you put an RFP out, you ought to be able to sell the property. And essentially, we're in a situation where you can't put an RFP out and be assured that we're going to be able to sell that property.
Well, I think that the RFP is going to make it clear that, you know, what the conditions are on transferring the title. We're not going to hide that from a prospective buyer. So let me back up for a second, right? The question that came from the town manager was really not what should we do with it. There were 2 questions posed. Did the master plan identify a preferred use for this parcel? And did the master plan speak to preferred uses in this area of town? So, you know, all this discussion of, you know, what should we do with it, I'm not sure that's what we're being asked to weigh in on in this conversation.
No, I don't think it is, but at the same time, I think I don't see how we can really look at the questions that we've been asked until we have some answers on the other questions.
All right, so I think we can summarize it a little bit in that our recommendation is that the select board consult some expertise to determine the cost benefits of demolishing the property. And also that we, I don't want to speak for the whole board, but that we would recommend that it be used for
highest and best.
Not highest and best, but some type of commercial tax-producing use that we don't recommend. I mean, again, I'm firmly against the idea of residential use there.
Me too.
But, you know, we can go down the road of what we don't want there, and if we want to give them a whole list of things that we don't want, but I think what the master plan would suggest is that highway business be commercial uses, and I think we should recommend that it be used for commercial uses, not residential, and not a municipal use, like one of the questions in the letter was several people have raised the idea of the town keeping the property for future municipal use. And I don't remember anything in the master plan. Everything in the master plan wanted either a rec center up at State Hospital, and when I say rec center, it would be a community center, not just recreation, but multi-purpose center up at State Hospital, and then revitalization of downtown. There was no concept of municipal use in this area. I don't, so I think we can recommend that. And the one recommendation I would like to include is that we consider planning for the redesign of that intersection so that we don't have to go back and get easements across this lot someday, so that, that we understand.
Yeah, but if you look at the map of where the property is, it's not going to affect the intersection. We don't own that property. The town does not own the property.
What I'm suggesting
at
is
the
that an
intersection.
off-ramp would come across this property to the lighted Oak Street.
Did you look at the map?
I did look at the map, Hazel.
It
I know
doesn't-
exactly what I'm talking
It doesn't
about.
look to me like that would work.
Okay, well, I can draw you a little line on the map, but
So Mark
trust
is
me.
talking about off-site mitigation. That's what you're talking about.
I'm talking about an on-ramp, off-ramp solution from the light at Oak Street to Route 9 west, so that all traffic comes off Route 9 west, comes down to the light at Oak Street, and then turns on to Milk Street. Right? And all traffic gets onto an on-ramp at that same light and goes Route 9 west to Worcester. No more of this, I'm going to double back at,
I'm not disputing the fact that it's a terrible intersection.
If you look at the assessor's map in that area, you'll notice that Mass Highway owns a significant amount of the property that people think belongs to Speedway Plaza. It belongs to Mass Highway. And the same on the opposite side, the area behind where the Volkswagen dealership now has their parking. I forget the address there, it's on Milk Street. They have a plan for that intersection. I'm not saying that your idea isn't a good idea, but I think you'd have to talk to them about it before you could even have a private entity say, we're going to affect that change. Mass Highway has to approve it. So when we looked at relocating the crosswalk at West Meadow Plaza, we couldn't even do that without Mass Highway's approval because they own 1,300 feet either way down Milk Street. So they own almost to the signalized intersection at Oak Street, and they own past West Meadow Plaza. We had to actually go all the way to the road before Indian Meadow. What's the name of that road? Is it Gary Road? Gary Street? What comes on to 135 before you get to Indian Meadow Road? They own almost all the way to that. So they own past Carlton Gardens. So we had to go up past that to make a crosswalk. My only point that I bring that up is because any change that we propose there, they're going to evaluate, and they're either going to approve it or not approve it.
Well, I'm not proposing a change there necessarily. I just want to make sure that we, envision a future there. And if that future is not coming down to the light at Oak Street, it's some other solution, then great. But it's got, to me, we've got to fix that intersection.
Yep.
Maybe after Otis Street. I don't know. I don't know what the order.
Otis Street's on the
voice-
docket, so, it will
Probably-
be after Otis Street.
Probably after East Main Street and Flanders too, right? I mean, who knows?
Maybe we'll be lucky enough
Who
to
knows?
get a buyer who wants
So
to
if I'm
fund
gonna
all the
write something to-
engineering and design work.
Right, there you go. Let's put
If
that
we're
in the
going to write
RFP.
something to advise the select board, we need to be pretty succinct so that they understand it. And it seems like point number one is the master plan recommends economic development of this property consistent with the highway business zoning, and you do not prefer a residential component to the use.
Or a municipal use.
Okay, residential or municipal component to the use. The second thing is the recommendation that Tim brought up, which I think you did a great job articulating that. I'd like you to send me an email. Rethink that, because you did a real good job the first time that you proposed that. And it has something to do with a licensed site professional to evaluate potential uses as a greenfield versus selling the building with the site currently. Yeah.
Difference.
So two separate points.
Yep.
Patrick, these sound right?
I also think with any input, in terms of marketing, that industrial use within that category, then we can also go back and revisit the master plan and see whether there's any, in that subset of uses, is there anything that would be better served? But I would think it would be maximum value per square foot, property taxes, appurtenances.
Well, the
and so
interesting
forth.
thing is, Tim, that when we did I sat on the hospital board, when we looked at what use there was going to be for the hospital thing, and we had 3 bids on that, and one of them was higher than the one we actually accepted. I mean, we looked at those 3 bids and we said, for the community, this is the better bid. It may not be, we had one that was, looked like it might be more money for the town, but that what we ended up with seemed to be a better idea for that particular piece
Well,
of
you're
property.
making my
So
point
that-
for me, so
That's
I'm-
what I'm saying,
yeah.
is you don't have to accept the highest of the best.
Well, that's what I'm saying as
Yeah.
well, okay? So when Patrick talks about decision criteria for the select board, when it comes back, that's the other time when we might use the master plan to kind of inform those priorities or the weighting of those criteria so that we achieve that outcome.
And we weighted it, that's just what we did, we weighted it depending on usage.
Criteria that is in alignment with the master plan.
Well said.
All right, can we move this forward? Because we've spent quite a bit of time on this, and I think, Jim, do you have a good idea of what, can you maybe circulate a draft and we can?
Yeah, and I'd still want an email from you.
Individually.
I just want one last comment on that, just be quick. It's just the first responders going into that building, I think it's important that we understand that our responders are, there's risk there. And we need to move quickly with this because it would really kill me if something happened at that site, that would be.
We had a Worcester warehouse fire in Westborough, it would absolutely, absolutely be the worst case scenario.
Exactly, so it needs to be
I
resolved.
completely agree with you.
That's all I have to say.
Okay, let's, next item on the agenda, we have, recently had a town election, so every year we have to elect planning board officers, if anyone's interested in serving as chair or vice chair.
All right, I would like to nominate Mark as chair.
Okay, thank you.
I second that.
All right. Any discussion? Nope. All those in favor? I'd like to nominate Hazel as vice chair.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's 5-0. I'm more than willing to rotate chair. I mean, you guys know that, right? Like, I don't want a monopoly on this. So feel free to discuss that with me next year.
Another couple months, I might be.
Okay. Well, you let me know when you're going to announce that.
I might
6 months.
have enough tenure.
Okay. Elect planning board. Okay, next, appoint representatives to the Capital Expenditure Committee and the Zoning Review Committee. I would like to nominate John for the Zoning Review Committee. Make a motion to nominate John.
I second that.
Any discussion of that?
You all right with that, John?
I am. Thank you.
Yeah, we discussed it earlier. I think it'll be a good opportunity for him to sit with Jim on a regular basis and learn the ropes. It's something I wish we had done with you a little more, but you're picking it up pretty quick, so that's good. We had a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor? 5-0. Capital expenditure. Pete, I thought we had talked about you taking that? Okay, I will make, does anyone else have an interest in that? Hazel, you were? Okay, I'll make a motion to appoint Pete to the Capital Expenditure Committee.
I'll second.
I heard Hazel's second. Any discussion? All those in favor? It's 5-0. We have a discussion on board signatory for meeting minutes. Historically, the vice chair has signed meeting minutes. I'm fine continuing with that.
That's fine with me.
I don't know if we want to appoint a second signatory in case Hazel's on vacation or.
Or just one of you.
That's fine with me.
It doesn't have to be a specific.
Okay, I'll make a motion that any member of the chair can sign the meeting minutes as a representative of the planning board.
I second that.
Is that a valid motion, or do we need to check with the clerk whether that's?
We already checked with her.
All right. Next, we have, I'm sorry, moving this along.
Do we have to vote on that or no?
I think
I
all
don't
those.
think so. I don't think, I would.
Well,
think it
let's
was
take a vote.
votable
I
motion.
made a motion, we had a second. All those in favor? That's 5-0 to have.
Seconded that?
I do.
Peter.
All right, next item was A&R plan at 22 Gleason Street. Jim, do you want to take us through this?
Sure, if the board would entertain me over here on the side table, It's a lot easier to lay out the,
Stretching portion of the meeting.
Hey, Jim. Can you just tell him to take that microphone over there?
What is it?
If he's gonna talk over there, just have him take the microphone.
Yeah. In Westborough TV.
there it is. Okay. So we're looking at a plan of land on Gleason Street, and this is 2 existing lots. Lot 4S1 is an existing lot, and lot 4R2 is an existing lot. The frontage on both lots is in Westborough. You can see the town line right here.
Old Town Line, is this one we're looking at?
Yep, that was an old town line.
Okay, so it's this line. Oh, I see it.
Yep, we have an old town line and a new town line. Each lot has frontage in Westborough and has rear property in Shrewsbury. The homes on both lots are intended to be built in Shrewsbury. They will not be built in Westborough, but because of the shape of the lot, a small sliver of land.
The lot is huge.
Yes.
This is the shape.
Yes, they're irregular shaped lots.
Okay.
So this one's kind of like a pie. This one's more regular. But because of the shape of the lots and the necessity to have adequate width to get to the rear of the building line, look here, a small piece of land needs to be transferred from one parcel to the other on both lots. So that this plan makes those lots buildable.
Right, and both of these pieces are in Westborough.
Yes.
Right, so they're going to be transferred actually into Shrewsbury?
So parcel A, which is here,
Yeah.
is to be conveyed to 4S1, which is this one, and become part of the final lot. And let's see, parcel B is to be conveyed to 4R2. So parcel B,
Yeah, this is for R2.
yep, parcel B.
This piece is going to go to there.
That's an easy.
That's an easement for
That's an
grading.
easement.
It's
So
this
where's
piece.
the-
It's
oh,
this
it's
piece.
that little
This
piece.
piece is going here.
So it's just an exchange, essentially.
Yes. Ignore the dotted line because the dotted line is just an old town line. Forget that.
I'm a little
This piece is
confused.
going here, and this one's going
These
here.
houses are going to be in Westborough?
No, they're going to be in Shrewsbury. They're going to both be back here. So this one will be here, this one will be here.
Oh my God, you're talking about these two little.
Yeah, 2 small parcels, yeah.
So when you say they're going to make it buildable, we're not actually ascertaining any buildability, right?
Correct. But they're not buildable the way that it's made right now because of the width to get to the rear of the lot.
Got it. Okay.
It doesn't affect our zoning at all.
Any questions?
A&R, nope.
Okay.
The fee is adequate, and I've already received the check.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve a plan of land for Birch Brush Realty Trust dated 3/24/22 at Gleason Street, is it?
Yes, on Gleason Street.
Plan of land in Shrewsbury and Westborough, Mass.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? I'm sorry, I'm going to revise the motion to endorse, because we don't approve an A&R, we endorse an A&R.
Do you want to do it again?
I'll make a motion to endorse the plan of land in Westborough and Shrewsbury for Birch Brush Realty dated 3/24/22.
And I'll,
Go ahead.
I'll second it.
Okay, I heard Tim second. Any discussion? Any other business, Jim? No, Jim signs those for us. Okay.
Want a motion to adjourn, Mr. Chairman?
No, we have minutes. And let me get to my screen so I remember. We had minutes circulated for March 1st, March 15th, and March 19th. Actually, that was March 19th to 20th, because I think we went to after midnight.
Yes, we did.
We have to put that?
No, we don't.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just reminding everybody of that
Yeah.
marathon that town meeting was. Any discussion or corrections on the minutes? Okay, I'll make a motion to approve those 3 minutes en masse.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's 5-0 in favor of approving those minutes. Jim, I think we will move on any discussion of the Master Plan Implementation Committee for the next meeting unless there's something we need to address urgently.
No, but I'm trying to get a determination of whether we can, whether we have to go out to bid and get at least 3 responses, or whether we can, because of the prior history with VHB, just simply hire them. I hope to have that in a couple days for you. We do need to talk about composition of a Master Plan Implementation Committee. I know that you got input from both Northborough and from VHB on that. I took notes. I sent notes to you on them several months ago. Please, let me see if I can dig that up and I'll resend it. The Housing Choice Subcommittee, I don't know if anyone wants to report on that or if you want me to report on that. We are meeting with the Board of Selectmen in a joint meeting on the 12th, a week from tonight, for a presentation on the Housing Choice Act, which you probably remember is under Chapter 40A, Section 3, a new law that requires the town to set aside at least 50 acres of land to create affordable, multi-use, multi-family housing, at least 50 acres of land that allows 15 units per acre. We have a subcommittee that is made up of members of the Board of Selectmen, myself, Fred Lenaro, the town manager, and Pete and Mark. We've been meeting regularly. We'll meet again tomorrow morning. We have a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to present to the Select Board and the Planning Board next Tuesday evening to explain the requirements of the plan. And I want to, of the program. I want to express for this board so that when you go in there, you understand that this is not going to create any housing. This is not even going to require that we create any housing. What it does is it requires us to create the zoning that if a developer comes along and can meet the regulations, the zoning is in place. So the state isn't saying you have to create a total of 1,250 units, which is what the math works out to for Westborough. It means you have to create the zoning that someday could create 1,250 units.
Right, it doesn't, you have to look at it as a blank slate. It doesn't matter what's there, right? It could already have 1,250 units on it, right? It could be a grandfathered use, right? Like, you could include Fountainhead, although that's not within half a mile. So, I mean, really, we can be somewhat creative with the zoning. It's got to be approved by DHCD, though. So I don't know how creative they'll let us get on this. I think we'll probably have to actually implement something that will create a realistic chance for development and not just, something that will never stimulate any multifamily development.
So quick confirmation and then a question. My recollection of your description of this, going back to when we discussed it, was this meets the DHCD's schedule of activities. In part, we need to demonstrate that you've made this presentation to the Select Board and the Planning Board.
Yes.
And it's not so much about all the analysis that you've done yet.
Right.
It's about meeting that standard.
Yep.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
And
And on the presentation, we will show the timeline.
Okay. The second thing is the documents originally kind of led me to believe that DHCD was still in a listening period about the RFP and that they were taking input from
Yes.
communities.
And so we
Has there been
submitted-
any closed loop on that?
So we submitted our input from our study committee last week on the last day of March, because that was the date that comments. And we had 5 specific comments that were multi-part. Most of them dealt with suggesting, not asking, suggesting that DHCD allow communities to be creative and allow what the program states, that at least 50% of that 50 acres can be in an area in town that's outside the half mile from the train station, but provides access to the train. So because we have the VIA shuttle service, and because we have a proposed bike trail, which will be the B-Wall, that will take commuters to the train station, we said, can't we use our downtown for that 50%? And let's go that one step further, that we not be required to make 25 acres the area that we would use for multifamily housing, but instead, why don't we designate fewer acres at higher density? So instead of 25 acres at 15 units per acre, maybe it's 10 acres at 30 units per acre. As long as we get to the same,
Same number.
Yeah, the average density has to be 15 units per acre.
Do we have
So-
a meeting next Tuesday?
We do. We have a joint meeting with the select board across the street, and they're going to, Jim's going to present on this whole thing.
Okay. All
So
right.
that'll be a
Solve
good
all my
opportunity
questions.
to, fill in a lot of the blanks for
and
you
you'll all
guys.
get the presentation in advance.
Thank you.
So just so you know, we have until July 2023
Right.
to do an action plan. We don't even have to have the zoning in place till 2024, I think, right? But the action plan has to spell out, are we going to have public meetings? I mean, so we have time to get this all done, but the only deadline is to get this presentation.
There's
to the
something
select
that has to, yeah, okay. So it's just going to be on this presentation, nothing else on our agenda?
Correct.
For next week. And
Next
then
week.
We don't meet the 19th.
Right, 'cause that's
we meet the
vacation
26th.
week.
We meet the 26th.
Got it.
All right, any other business?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
What?
That's 5-0 in favor of adjournment.